Good evening, I'm Anthony Robart. This is Crime Beat. Tonight, an aspiring actress finally making headways in her career vanishes.
She hadn't spent any money, she hadn't touched her Facebook, she wasn't on her phone.
Although there are no indications of foul play, it is out of character for her to not be in touch with family and friends, and we are all concerned for her welfare.
And now, here's Nancy Hixt with Shannon Madill's last audition.
Tell you a bit about me, just a general me. Okay, I am interning for my radio and television program.
Shannon Madill loved to perform and truly came alive on screen.
A couple of lines. Does that work for you?
A couple of lines. How exciting.
Yeah?
Do the boy voice.
I'm not sure if I can give you a couple of lines, sir. I don't know how I'll be able to do that.
Yeah, you got it?
Okay.
She spent years trying to make it as an actress, and at 25, it was looking like she might finally land her big break. This video was an audition for a role in a TV series. It was recorded November 26th, 2014.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Hours later, she vanished. Days went by, and there was no word from Shannon. After more than a week, her family made a plea for Shannon to call home.
This is my sister. She's a lovely, outgoing girl. And Shannon, if you see this, please, you're not in trouble. We all love you and we miss you so much. We don't need to know where you are. We just want to know that you're safe.
It wasn't completely out of character for Shannon to be hard to track down, but it was unusual for her to disappear for so many days. Police said there was no evidence to suggest foul play. Would the young actress simply take off? Could she have been in an accident? Her family was desperate for answers.
You are so loved and you are so missed. And we just please let us know that you're okay wherever you are.
Shannon was the youngest of 4 Madill children. And even as a child, she loved performing.
Oh, she loved the spotlight. Her favorite thing was a microphone and a spotlight from the time she was tiny.
Shannon was very outgoing even from a small age. She loved doing like the plays at the church and that, and the plays at school, and she was a real performer. She loved to be in front of an audience performing, and that never changed.
She was just such a little ham. She just loved to play and be silly. Of course, I'm probably going to tell this story wrong, but she met my uncle when she was about 2 or 3 at the airport for the first time, and she ran up to him and said, kiss me like you've never kissed me before. So yeah, she's been a ham since she was really, really young.
Shannon played 15 instruments, including the trombone and the French horn.
Has it all been worth it? Here I am. The Queen!
She was always a bit of a spitfire. That red hair and fiery personality were always very present. And I mean, I think that probably partly just came from being the baby of the family, where you can, everyone's been through it, so no one's really paying attention to you as much anymore. Nothing that she could do could be as worse as anything that's come before her, so she kind of had the freedom to be a little bit more out there.
Shannon Madill.
After high school, Shannon went to university, but left soon after to pursue acting.
I was really, really concerned about it at the time, I'm not gonna lie. As somebody who used to do a bunch of performing, I know how hard it can be, and the scariest part, of course, is that it's a lifelong rejection. You're constantly on a job interview, really.
When Shannon was 21, she fell in love.
So she met Josh at a party. It was a mutual friends that they were all there. And that would have been 2010. I want to say it was probably about December 2010.
Josh Burgess was the opposite of Shannon personality-wise, so they seemed to balance each other out for a perfect fit.
They found a happy medium together because they both very much enjoyed the quiet times at home. They both enjoyed watching TV together, playing video games together, some D&D. They had a lot of nerdy interests that they shared, and that was where they were able to have that overlap of interest. Shannon seemed to really like him, so we all started to really like him. We enjoyed having him around, and he seemed to make her happy, which made us happy.
After dating for about 4 years, Shannon and Josh got married.
And all of a sudden, out of the blue, I got a call on a Wednesday to find out that they were getting married on the Saturday. And that would have been May of 2014. So they were in a car and they decided, you know what, let's just get married. And they're both super Star Wars nerds. So they decided May the 4th was coming up on that Saturday, and they called it Justice of the Peace and found out that they were available. So they decided they would do a quick wedding at the JP's house.
In the months that followed, Shannon was busier than ever, trying to make it as an actress and juggling auditions. A lot of those took her to Edmonton, a 3-hour drive north of Calgary. So she spent a lot of time on the road, commuting back and forth. But she was making it work. In late November of 2014, she planned to meet up with her older brother at a Calgary dinner theater. But Shannon didn't show up.
I mean, the 30th was the day she was supposed to be going to Stage West with Brett, her brother. Shannon was a marvelous person. She had many things, but she was a little flighty at times, and she could, sort of forget things or that and not necessarily let people know. I mean, I sent her a text right away at that point saying, "Where are you? You're supposed to be at dinner with Brett." And I didn't hear anything back that night, which didn't totally surprise me. When I tried again in the morning and didn't hear anything back, and I thought, well, you know what, she knows I'm not happy, and she probably just wants to avoid hearing it from me personally. So I phoned Aaron.
So on December 1st, which was a Monday, I was at work. I got a phone call from my father saying that Shannon had missed dinner with my younger brother and that she wasn't answering her phone calls. My dad had been calling her, my younger brother had been calling her, and she just wasn't picking up. One of the things that happened with Shannon is if she would get really overwhelmed or depressed, she would sometimes completely switch up her sleep schedule. So I thought it was possible that maybe she had fallen asleep in the afternoon because she'd been doing late nights recording, and she'd slept through the dinner, and now she was just too embarrassed to pick up the phone because she didn't want to admit that she'd messed up. So I decided to call her, hoping that she wouldn't avoid my phone call since I wasn't mad at her. But she didn't answer my phone call, so I left her a message saying that, just let us know you're okay, we're worried about you.
We were actually out at dinner. It was about 7 o'clock on the Monday night, and Aaron says, well, I've been over to her place. She's not there. Josh doesn't know where she is, and so on. And I said, hey, I think we should go to the police.
Days later, police and family made a plea for help in finding Shannon.
Although there are no indications of foul play, it is out of character for her to not be in touch with family and friends, and we are all concerned for her welfare.
Shannon's family stood side by side, appealing for information about her disappearance.
This is Josh, this is Shannon's husband. This is my mother, Lisa. This is Lindsay, our sister-in-law, our brother, Brett. This is my other brother, Tyler, and that's my father, David.
It was surreal, I think is the word I would use. It almost disembodied. You felt like you were present, but you were watching yourself being there.
Coming up, as police ramp up their search for Shannon Madill, some mysterious photos found posted in a city park lead to a potential break in the case. Welcome back. The family of an up-and-coming actress who mysteriously vanished search for answers as police investigate new clues. And now, here's Nancy Hixt with Shannon Madill's last audition.
The days that followed are a blur for Shannon's family as they tried to make sense of her sudden disappearance.
As you're trying to piece together the story, you start asking questions that people aren't answering, like where's her car? Where's her phone? Where's her purse? Is it still there? How the dog is being left at the house? That doesn't make any sense for Shannon. The big theory was, oh, she probably went up to Edmonton and she might just be laying low with this guy.
There was no sign of Shannon. Where could she possibly be? If she was still alive, why hadn't she contacted her family?
She hadn't spent any money. She hadn't touched her Facebook. She wasn't on her phone. There was no contact. That's when people start to really get concerned, because in this day and age, it's impossible to not leave a digital footprint, at least in some manner, and to still be able to function. It wasn't like she had a whole bunch of cash laying around. She wouldn't be able to support herself.
Nearly 2 weeks later, there was a major development in the case. Photos of a woman whose face was covered by her hair and flowers were found attached to trees in a park in Calgary. It looked like it could be Shannon. The resemblance was enough to spur a massive search of Fish Creek Provincial Park, one of the largest urban parks in Canada. Police spent 2 days scouring the area for clues. They even brought in a cadaver dog, dogs specially trained to find human remains.
I remember those 2 days while they were doing those searches. Your stomach is just on edge. You're so concerned about what they're going to find, and every time my phone would ring, it was like your stomach just drops out, because you think every time the phone rings, this is when you find out, this is when they found her, she's dead, it's over.
That search came up empty. It turned out the photos in the park were not related to Shannon's disappearance. Instead, they were a part of a student art project. Those involved came forward to police after seeing the search on the news. It was all just an eerie coincidence. Shannon was still missing.
I withdrew into myself. I did not want to get out of bed, did not want to eat anything. It was dreadful. It was really dreadful. There's just this oppressive feeling of, are you going to survive it, let alone what's going to be the outcome. I was concerned that if we found her alive, what condition she would be in, what mental condition she would be in.
Police prepared Shannon's family for all possible outcomes.
There had been an incident that none of us heard about till after the fact, where Shannon had called Josh from the LRT, claiming that she was considering jumping, and that the police had been called and involved in that.
I became obsessed with the river. It's almost like you pick the lesser of all evils, and somehow her having a quick drowning became the least horrible answer to me, so I became obsessed with finding her in the river.
I mean, to this day, I still can't drive by the Bow River without remembering that.
Police searched the rivers, but again, no luck. It seemed like the investigation hit a dead end. By May of 2015, nearly 6 months passed with no sign of Shannon Madill. That's when veteran Calgary Police Detective Christina Witt took over the case. At the time, Detective Witt was working in the Missing Persons Unit, but she'd worked in the Homicide Unit before that. She's well known for being a determined and tenacious investigator. Witt went over every detail of the case and took another look at the people in Shannon's life, starting with her husband.
He seemed like a nice, genuine person. He was very cooperative with police. They were allowed into the residence with his consent on at least 2 occasions, and they looked around and didn't see anything suspicious. He was always very cooperative when asked to come for interviews.
You'll recall Josh stood by Shannon's family, as they made a plea for help just days after she went missing.
You know, the family was very close to Josh, and never once did they suggest that he could have harmed Shannon, which that also played into it for us, I think, because a lot of times the family would be like, look, you got to look at her husband, or you got to look at this, and then we will trust the family's instincts to an extent as well and look into those things. And the family did not think that at all. He was not on their radar at all. They loved Josh. They trusted Josh. They didn't have any reason for themselves to think that he could have harmed Shannon.
That's when police learned Josh wasn't the only man in Shannon's life.
Coming up, would those new revelations about Shannon Madill's romantic interests help police solve her disappearance? That's coming up after the break. Welcome back. Police discover Shannon Madill's husband isn't the only man in her life, and she's not the only woman in his. And now, here's Nancy Hixt.
Her and Josh, we learned very early on through Josh that they had an open marriage. They had been married for 7 months by this time, and this, according to Josh, was Shannon's idea to have an open marriage.
Shannon was open with her family about her relationship.
Shannon told me that they didn't have a conventional marriage and that Josh wanted to have a girlfriend on the side, and Shannon wanted to keep her options open because she enjoyed having flings.
Erin said they were committed to each other, just not physically committed. In their relationship, it wasn't considered cheating, and it was all openly discussed. While many might find Shannon and Josh's arrangement unconventional, Erin said it worked for them.
I didn't actually have concerns. They had a lot of open communication. Shannon would actually meet Josh's girlfriends, so she was very well aware of who Josh was dating and spending his time with. So it was a very open, honest conversation that they were both willing to have with each other, and it was respectful on both sides.
For police, the open marriage created some complexities to the case and more people to look at and investigate. Could this missing persons case have been foul play after all?
So that was also something we had to look at, was this, could there have been harm done to her by someone that she was dating that we didn't know? So there was about 7, I think, different people who, whether she was acquaintances or had dated, that we needed to interview as well.
6 months into their marriage, right before Shannon disappeared in the fall of 2014, the couple hit some bumps in their relationship. Things got so bad, they were ready to call it quits.
The very next day, Josh came home and told Shannon that he'd overreacted and he would actually like to try to work on the marriage after all. They decided that the best way to work on that would be to focus only on the marriage, and they agreed that they would close off the marriage until they sorted through what was going on.
But closing the marriage wasn't so easy.
Shannon ended up finding out about a week later that he was still seeing the girlfriend. He told Shannon that he was going to break it off, and Shannon sent the girlfriend a text. They always had open communication and open phones. And then about a week later, she found out that his phone was locked. She asked him to open it. And when Shannon opened up the phone, she found out that he'd actually been in communication with the girlfriend, and he'd requested to go and break up with her in person. And it turned out in that in-person meeting, he actually told the girlfriend that he was planning on leaving his wife and that she would become the primary partner.
So Shannon was pretty hurt.
Shannon was incredibly hurt. She felt incredibly deceived.
Shannon had some tough decisions to make. Her acting career was leading her to Edmonton, and given the unraveling marriage, she decided to move out. As that transition happened, they made a point of avoiding each other at their home.
So there was often that she would go out and wouldn't be home for a couple of days and then would come home, and they would miss each other, and their schedules were completely different because Josh was doing the 9 to 5 and Shannon was usually working in the evenings to do stand-up, or she would be working overnight reading her books. So it was very common that they wouldn't actually see each other during that time.
On the night she went missing, Josh told police he spoke to her briefly, then went to bed. When he woke up the next morning, she was gone. Investigators said Shannon's footprints of life ended November 27, 2014. Those are digital footprints, like bank transactions, emails, texts, any normal activities that show someone is still alive. In Shannon's case, that stopped at about 12:30 a.m. on November 27, 2014, except for some strange phone activity 12 hours later in her alley.
Our tech crimes unit examined her cell phone records, and they were able to determine that on the afternoon of the 27th, her phone is out in the alley, kind of does a walkabout in the alley and back into the residence. And so that was a flag because Josh hadn't found the phone right away, but he does notify police within a few days that he'd found her phone, and couldn't really give an explanation of how the phone is out doing this walkabout in the alley. So she was last seen like in the early morning hours of November 27th. And so then this is like 12 hours later in the afternoon that the phone is out and about in the alley.
8 months after Shannon Madill's disappearance, police decided they needed to take another look at her husband's story.
We've now had several interviews with Josh, and he's, the important time period, he's vague and isn't giving a lot of detail, and it's not really adding up.
The strange cell phone activity in the alley created suspicion.
We didn't reveal to him right away about the cell phone doing the walkabout, and he certainly wasn't offering an explanation of why perhaps her phone would be even still on after that kind of time period, right? Because cell phones, typically the battery dies. So, there was no real obvious thing, but the totality of all those things together raised the suspicion enough to believe that, yes, she could have been murdered.
Police applied for warrants to seize Josh's cell phone along with the vehicle they shared.
The difficulty was, in order to get a court order, you need to believe that an offense had occurred. And early on, that threshold wasn't being met because of the concerns for suicide and the family's suggestion that she could just be away somewhere and not wanting to talk to anyone.
By that point, police had already searched the home twice. Each time, they found nothing out of the ordinary.
He's definitely starting to look more suspicious to us at that point. He's our only good possible suspect at that point. We'd ruled out a lot of possibilities through all those witness interviews. He's the last person to see her alive during domestic relationships at that point where they're looking to break up or separate. Those are usually the most volatile times, and so that all played into our level of increasing suspicion of Josh.
The mysterious missing persons case was about to take a dramatic turn. That's coming up on Crime Beat. Welcome back to Crime Beat. The mystery of what happened to Shannon Madill unraveled quickly and unexpectedly. And now, here's Nancy Hixt.
On July 2nd, 2015, just over 7 months after Shannon disappeared, Detective Witt went to Josh Burgess's home one more time, this time to execute the search warrant.
I knocked on the door and I called his cell phone, and he didn't answer the first time, but we could hear the movement in the room, so we also had already identified but said again, Josh, it's the police. We just want you to come to the door. We have a warrant for your cell phone and your car. We would like you to come out. Technically, we have the authority to come in, but we just want you to come to the door so that we can talk to you and deal with this. He answered the phone the second time, and I felt like he was trying to buy some time, like he was stalling with me, and he's like, I just need a few minutes. I need to go downstairs. I need to put my pants on, and they're in the wash, and he's kind of upset, and he's like, well, why do you need to speak to me? And I'm trying to explain, and I'm getting a little frustrated. I'm like, Josh, honestly, we just need you to come to the door. We just want you to talk to us. We have this court order. Come to the door so that this is a lot easier than it has to, let's make this easy for you and me and come to the door. And so he's kind of stalling, and I think really he was just trying to figure out what he was going to do, what his next step was, because we'd caught him off guard.
Detective Witt said what happened next was the last thing she expected.
He gets very upset and starts crying and blurts out to me that I killed her, I killed my wife. I verbalize that so that the other people with me understand what's happening, and I'm like, I'm sorry, Josh, can you say that again? And he's like, yes, I killed my wife. And I said, you killed Shannon? And he said, yes, I killed Shannon. And so then that was just a complete transition. It changed the situation, and from that point on, we went from him just coming to the door to give us his cell phone to now we need to negotiate to get him out of the house safely for him, safely for us.
Detective Witt kept him on the phone for an hour and 20 minutes until finally he came out.
He wasn't really wearing anything other than a pair of underwear, and he was covered in blood, which I wasn't expecting.
Josh Burgess was taken to hospital.
He had used a small, like a pocket knife, and had been cutting at his neck. So once he was assessed medically, it was determined that he hadn't cut any main artery. So he'd lost quite a bit of blood, but it required some stitching. He didn't require surgery. But then he had to be held over for a psych assessment.
In the meantime, police got another warrant. They needed to search the home. It was the next night, after Josh was released from hospital, that he was arrested and taken to Calgary Police Headquarters. Detective Kurt Jacobs was the first to try to get Josh to open up.
Hey, Josh. Hey. Doing all right? Considering? I'm Kurt.
Hi, Kurt. I know that Shannon's dead, and I also know that you're responsible for her death. I know that definitively. What's going through your head, buddy?
I really miss her.
You miss her?
Yeah.
Yeah. Look at this picture and tell me what you would say to her if you could.
Same thing I always said to her.
Yeah, what was that?
That I love her very much.
That you love her very much.
Well into the wee hours of the following day, Detective Witt went in to talk to Burgess.
You can tell me, do the right thing for Shannon and tell me.
But Burgess wasn't willing to talk anymore. Detectives decided to let him rest. But before they did, they let him know one more thing.
The cadaver dogs are finding some stuff right now, so there's a lot going on at the house, so we're going to focus our attention on that right now, and you can have a sleep, and someone will be in to speak with you tomorrow.
As cadaver dogs searched his home, Josh Burgess slept.
Morning, Josh. Get any sleep?
I think so.
A little bit?
In the morning, Detective Jacobs came in with an update.
We have Shannon's body. She's been recovered, but there's no doubt you're responsible for the death of Shannon. We have evidence. You've already admitted to killing her. Her body's been recovered on your property.
Police found Shannon. She had been at their home all along.
Did you intend for this to happen, Josh? Can you put your head up for a few minutes? I know listen, I know this is tough, Josh. I know it's difficult for you, but I realize that.
Burgess was again left alone. He stared at Shannon's headshot and whispered.
Josh, I've just got some stuff here. I'm gonna hook up. I'm a detective with the homicide unit.
Yeah.
A short time later, a third officer, Detective Ray Bangloy, took over the interview.
My purpose of this interview is try to get the truth out of him. Ultimately, this is for court purposes, and obviously the more information we have, the better. And it's also for the victim's family, so they can understand as to what happened and why this happened.
Detective Bangloy is a veteran police investigator and Witt's current partner. He does undercover work, and that's why we're not showing his face. He's well known for his interview skills and for getting offenders to confess.
I'm not here to judge you.
Detective Bangloy had the green light from the prosecutor to charge him, but he wanted to give Burgess one final chance to tell his side of the story.
I came home, she was on the couch, she was watching some stupid Johnny Depp movie. And I just asked her if she wanted to have angry makeup sex. And we did. And I was happy. But it was pretty rough. And I told her we didn't have to do that. We could just make love. She thought I said breakup sex. She got so mad at me.
What type of mean things did she say to you that night?
She said she regretted marrying me.
She said she regretted marrying you.
She could have done all this on her own.
She could have done what on her own?
Her career. She didn't need me.
There's a little bit of misunderstanding where Shannon believes that Josh said breakup sex, and that's when she kind of just goes off on Josh and starts saying very cruel things. He mentions to Josh that she regretted marrying him, that she never needed him by her side, and that he was the worst husband, and just a lot of very cruel things. And after that, Josh was trying to just calm her down and actually puts his hand on her mouth, and Shannon bites his hand and screams.
I just wanted her to stop talking.
You wanted her to stop talking?
Yeah.
But what was she saying?
She never wanted to see me again.
She never wanted to see you again?
No. Said she was disgusted touching me.
She said she was disgusted touching you. What else did she do? What else did she say?
I didn't let her say anything else.
You didn't let her say anything else? Why?
I'm so ashamed. I'm so angry.
And what happened?
I put my hand over her mouth. And she bit me. She screamed bloody murder.
She bit you?
She screamed.
And she screamed?
I just wanted her to be quiet. I didn't hurt her. I just couldn't listen to that anymore. Put my hands around her neck.
Put your hands around her neck? Yeah.
So sorry.
Dude. Hey.
No. Please don't. I killed her with my hands. When my hands got tired, I used the belt. I don't know why.
You used the belt?
I don't know why. I just didn't stop. I could have just stopped. I could have just walked away. I don't know why. I don't know. I don't know.
He choked Shannon until she was lifeless.
He seemed very remorseful, and as he was telling me what happened, he was crying and very emotional. But once he did get the story out, you could just tell it was cathartic, and it was like a huge weight off his shoulders. You know, you think about it, 8 months of carrying this lie and betraying the family that took him in. It was a huge emotional relief for him.
Shannon was gone, murdered by her husband. The entire time she was missing, he kept her at their home. While police searched the house more than once, they never looked inside the storage containers on the back porch. He said he put bags of empty bottles all around her so no one would notice. Then, just 2 weeks before his arrest, he moved her body and buried her in the yard.
I chose my lawn because I just didn't want her to leave. I didn't want to hide her.
Burgess maintained his silence right up until that day he blurted his confession out to Detective Witt. He even stood with the family as they made a plea to the public for help, knowing the whole time exactly where Shannon was.
I think Josh was still very attached to her and this isn't something he'd ever done before. I think he didn't know what to do with her body, and he didn't know how to really part with her in maybe some ways, and I don't know if that's what led to him hanging on to her for so long. Certainly not something you would normally see. Usually people try to get rid of the evidence quickly, and that's not what he did.
After the break, Shannon's family finally learns the truth about what happened to Shannon. But would there be justice in her case? Police had a confession, but would the punishment fit the crime in her family's eyes? And now, here's Nancy Hixt with the conclusion of Shannon Madill's last audition.
Josh Burgess was charged with the second-degree murder of Shannon Madill. Her family finally began to grieve the loss.
A memorial is being planned for this Sunday for a Calgary woman murdered earlier this year. The family of Shannon Madill Burgess has been on an emotional roller coaster. First, she was missing for months. Then her body was discovered, and her husband is charged with her murder. Nancy Hixt is covering this story, and Nancy, her family wants to celebrate Shannon's life.
Well, this family has really been through the worst possible nightmare, first not knowing what happened to Shannon and then getting the worst news possible when her body was found. So now, 9 months after she was last seen, her family is going to hold a tribute to the 25-year-old.
A sister will always be there to listen, to laugh, to lean on, to comfort, or simply to care. There's no one who's more in your corner, and no one you're more grateful to. There's no better friend than a sister, and no better sister than you.
The truth about what happened that fateful night wouldn't come out until more than 2 years later during the court proceedings.
Good afternoon. We have breaking news from the Calgary Court Center. Joshua Burgess has pled guilty to second-degree murder in the death of his wife, Shannon. Global's Nancy Hixt is at the court with the latest. Nancy, what can you tell us on this?
Well, the justice in this case will be passing his sentence in just a few minutes. Burgess faces an automatic life sentence. Defense and the Crown have made a joint submission for parole ineligibility, suggesting that Burgess serve 10 years before he is eligible for any kind of release. There were tears in the courtroom as the details of the killing of Shannon Madill Burgess were read, along with emotional victim impact statements. Joshua Burgess admits he strangled his wife to death, first with his hands and then his belt. He then hid her body in a large plastic container that he kept on his patio for about 7 months before burying her in his front yard.
He waited until the very last second to plead guilty. Based off of his behavior with the murder, with everything he did afterwards, the ways in which he intentionally went around to save his own hide repeatedly, I find it very hard to believe that his choice to plead guilty had anything to do with helping us. I believe it was entirely a selfish decision because he didn't want his confession to be aired and he didn't want to have to sit through a trial.
I should clarify, because there was no trial, the videotaped confession wasn't played in court. The first time his confession was made public was on an episode of my Crime Beat podcast about Shannon's case. Josh Burgess was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for at least 10 years.
No sentence would ever be sufficient to make up for the loss we've endured. I think it's something that we've all kind of had to weigh, you know, the sense of betrayal of him sitting with us, conversing with us, and you know, that I think just makes it that much more difficult to process.
Shannon's family trusted Josh. He was like family to them. So this was the ultimate betrayal.
The fact that he led us on for 7 months and was quite prepared to pretend he knew nothing about it and let us, you know, have to live with all of the not knowing in that.
Betrayal was really the only emotion that I felt. I was not angry with him. I was not, I didn't want to harm him. It was sadness and betrayal. It was, how could you do this to us and to our family? We supported you when we thought that your wife was missing, and you've done this thing?
The real gut punch happened when I finally found out the whole story. Because at this point in time, I still believed that even if he was involved, it had to have been an accident some way. I never thought that he actually intentionally would hurt her, but more, you have a fight at the top of the stairs, push her, she hits her head on the way down, and he panicked. That was sort of the narrative that I had up until this point. It wasn't an accident. He chose to kill her.
Josh Burgess is eligible to apply for day parole in July of 2022. Shannon's family plans to attend those hearings so the parole board fully understands the impact of his crime.
The way I like to describe it is that there's a little piece of my heart that's died, and that's where she lives. And sometimes I can take it out and grieve over it, and then I can put it away and go back to what I was doing before.
Shannon used to come to this spot to walk her dog or take in a view of the city. It's just blocks from where she lived with Josh. It's where her ashes are scattered. And it's where her family comes to remember her on her birthday and raise a glass in her honor.
She was such an amazing, funny, creative, intelligent individual that I just find it so sad that was taken away. And you know, I'm selfish. I'm very sad it was taken away from me. I'm sad it was taken away from all of the family, and beyond that, I'm sad that it was taken away from the world. Because I think she could have done some really amazing things if she'd been given the time to.
The countless home videos of Shannon are treasures her family holds dear. There, even just for a few moments, she comes alive again on screen. At the end of her final audition tape, recorded the same day she was killed, Shannon signs off. It's the closest thing to a goodbye her family ever got to hear.
So yeah, that's me. Are we good? Thanks, I'm gonna go. I have to do this editing thing for tonight. You're gonna edit this, right?
A memorial scholarship was handed out in Shannon Madill's name in 2019. The Gems for Gem charity organization presented the special award to a survivor of domestic abuse to honor Shannon's memory with the gift of education.
I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat.
Want more on this Crime Beat episode? Listen to my Crime Beat podcast now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts.